Hi everyone, and welcome back to Project No Buy. In today's video, we're going to be reckoning with my 6 red lipsticks. And I know I've just held up 3, actually supposed to be 4 of them here, but there are 2 more that are still currently in one of my bags downstairs after taking them to a recent performance where I wore or kind of compared these last 2. So I have now done a wear test on all 6 of these, and it actually only took 3 performances, 3 or 4, to test all of them. And so I did take pictures, kind of B-roll from each of these times. And I definitely only need to be keeping half of this collection because so many of them are so similar to each other. So basically over the course of the first few symphony performances, which is where it's easiest for me to wear a red lipstick in everyday life, it's easiest for me because I have the occasion and I guess the reason to put the time into preparing myself, but also to be presenting myself in a more elevated way. It's kind of too much for an everyday look. I know nothing's too much if you don't want it to be too much. You can do whatever you want, wear whatever you want. Some people are daily red lipstick wearers. I do think it would come across as a little bit overdone for the city in which I live and the job that I currently have, as well as most of my time outside of work being spent as, kind of a stay-at-home mom with just errands and kind of child carrying work to be doing. And so it is something that's maybe not the best fit for everyday life for me at this time, but where there's a will, there's a way. And if that's what you want to do, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm not saying that it would be wrong for me to do it. It's just something that I don't have an interest in maintaining with my current everyday life and activities. It would probably also get smeared across my face by little hands or, something that would probably not look the best because I wouldn't be maintaining it. So anyway, that's my disclaimer on my use of red lipstick. So I had 6 of them. You might have seen in my makeup declutter. I swatched all of them, I think, and determined that 2 of them, there are kind of 2 or 3 pairs of 2 rather, that are very similar to each other. And so I think I might have actually organized them like this in this kind of pairing here. So these 2 were the first that I tried, and I actually did half and half looks on my lips for these. And I think this time I tried half and half and then went over the whole look with the Chanel version that I decided to keep. So you might be seeing a picture of this here. This was for the first concert of the season with the half standing program that I kind of felt my back complaining about a little bit, and half sitting. So this was like a Baroque music program where the first half we were stood up and then the second half we were with a large choir, so we were seated as the orchestra. And so I wore this lipstick, these lipsticks rather, and then covered this mini one up. And the reasons that I've decided to keep the Chanel for now, which, and there might be kind of a plot twist later, but this was a gift from my mom. It's also a full size. There's something, I guess, about the luxury of it that is somewhat undeniable, but it's also more sentimental just because it was something my mom brought from New Zealand for me. And I didn't choose it, right? Like I didn't purchase it for myself. I would not have purchased it for myself. It's a little fussy for me with the little case and the packaging, but the packaging is magnetic, so it does stay closed a little bit better than some of these non-magnetic ones. And the color is so similar to this mini one that I really don't need to keep 2. And the minis were actually kind of challenging to apply during this whole experiment. And so what I've learned, despite talking about how mini lipsticks in particular are a good choice because the amount of product is actually more reflective of what I can use within the expiry periods, because there's no way I can use up this quantity of lipstick in the time before it expires. That's a huge amount of lipstick. And for the amount of times I wear red lipstick, this is a much more appropriate quantity here. But despite all of that, all of those things I've said before, it was harder to apply and to work with the minis, all of the minis, in this kind of 6 lipstick reckoning. And despite choosing to keep one of the minis, again, in these 3 different pairings, the full size won 2 times out of 3, and the mini one time because I preferred the color of the last pairing. So we'll get to that when we get to the examples. But despite my good things about minis in theory, in practice, I do prefer the full size. Now, do I need to own 3 full-size red lipsticks? remains to be seen. But for now, I'm going to call cutting 6 down to 3 enough of a win to not spend more time obsessing over it for now. In the meantime, these mini lipsticks are probably going to go to my kids for dress-up purposes. I don't really care if they get destroyed. I also don't really think I have a reasonable way to repurpose them, given that they are all used and they are kind of not the nicest product in terms of, the plastic is really low quality feeling and there's not a whole lot of product. They're already kind of smudged and messed up a little bit. And so they will get used for kind of recreational purposes and or miniature art projects. The next pairing I had here was MAC's Ruby Woo and Elson by Pat McGrath. I think I did a little speaking clip about these ones, so I'll go ahead and insert that now. Just got home and a quick lipstick update. This is how things are looking at the end of the night. This half was MAC Ruby Woo and this half was Elson by Pat McGrath. I always forget which packaging is the one with the little lips on it. And that's a mini, and the Ruby Woo is just a regular full size. I do think that the Pat McGrath had more like bleeding out of the lip line, but it does seem a tiny bit darker. And I'm not actually sure. I think the difference might be more apparent on camera than in real life. The colors, to me at least, and maybe I'm just not a makeup guru, but to me they look very, very similar in real life, not on camera. So you can kind of see the color on this side is a little more washed out on the video, at least on the preview or whatever. And yeah, so I don't know exactly what I'm leaning towards now. I guess I can tell you I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep the MAC full size and let go of this one just because of the bleeding out of the lip line. And I'm probably going to keep the other mini of the Pat McGrath, the Vendetta darker shade. And I just don't know if I want to have 2 in the same formula with the kind of slight bleeding out of the lines issue. I think that issue happens on the other one as well, but I like the color a lot more, or it's a notable, I like the color of that one specifically. So this one is, to me, too similar to this one to justify keeping. So there we go. There's lipsticks 3 and 4. Let's see if we can try the next 2 maybe tomorrow. Oh, last thing I will say is that the MAC one was more drying. So when I put it on at first, I could feel a little bit of tightness on the side, and this one was easier to wear, but that kind of went away with more time. This was just on my drive there after applying it, and after actually wearing it longer, it wasn't really an issue. So that's how they felt to wear. And I could probably also apply, certainly the MAC one, a little more liberally, do it in a more opaque way, do more coats if I wanted a more saturated color. So there's those points as well. Okay, see you in the next one. And after having done both of these wearing tests, I initially thought that the Chanel and the Gwen Stefani were the brightest of the reds, the lightest, maybe the most orange, and that these were kind of the middle ground. But I wonder if both of these are actually quite bright. I need to do next a half and half test with these two, the Chanel and the MAC, just to see how different they really are. Because in the pictures, in the videos, on my lips, it does feel like they kind of have the same effect. And so it kind of makes me think, do I need to have both of these even? And if I had to choose between 2, the Chanel is a more comfortable formula for me to wear, since the MAC does feel a little bit dry and a little bit kind of, it feels like it's stretching my lips out when I have it on, maybe because of that dryness. And so the next test to do is between these 2. I am suspicious, I think, or I conceptually think that the MAC Ruby Woo is a little bit of a blue-based standard middle-of-the-road red, right? Like, I think that's why it's so popular. And again, the Chanel really does feel lighter and more orange and not really... initially, I didn't really like these lightest shades, but upon further reflection, upon further wear, it did feel okay. It did start to feel okay. It started to feel like the lighter shade was kind of brightening and enlivening, I guess, kind of bringing out both my tan and maybe the yellow in my undertones, which is part of what I don't like about it, but part of what I eventually grew to think was okay about it. And I didn't think it looked bad per se. And then again, with the comparisons of finish between the MAC and the Chanel has kind of more of a slight sheen to it, whereas the Ruby Woo is a little more matte. And again, I'm not in a rush to let go of either one of these products, so chances are I probably will just keep the remaining 3 that I've decided are the winners of these pairs and, you know, not go out and try to, again, I don't really have a good way to repurpose even the MAC Ruby Woo, which is such a classic shade. I could throw it up on a resale website, but I just don't know if I feel good doing that, given that it is kind of old and kind of used. And so I can still use it. I can still enjoy what use I can get out of it over the next few years. And again, you know, I kind of feel like makeup expiry dates are a personal matter, right? Like if I'm okay using a lipstick for the next 10 years, if it continues to smell fine and look fine, that's my prerogative. But I also don't want to then attempt to sell that on to somebody else. You know, like that's not what I'm suggesting for you, or I don't really feel good about listing this as like a resale kind of used product. And so I think the best thing for me to do is to keep it. I am just curious about whether I find value in having both of these 2. The final 2 were the most different of the red lipsticks, and that's because they have more darker undertones. And so maybe I'll insert the video that I have of that one here. This is Pat McGrath's Vendetta, so another one of these minis, and the Sophia Nygaard collab from whenever that was with ColourPop. I'll look up the year maybe and put that up here. And that shade, I believe, is called Fred. So again, to me, these 2 were subtly different maybe on each half of my lips, but not different enough that I didn't go out like that, right? Like I didn't actually go over either side with the other. I just went out like this and kind of proved the point to myself that having 2 of these is redundant. And in this case, I do prefer the slightly darker tone of the Pat McGrath Vendetta. I do remember the first time that I wore this, first few times that I wore this, I think in a Christmas show 2 years ago, I do remember getting compliments on that shade. And so once again, I've had this lipstick for multiple years already. It's a mini, and the other mini Pat McGrath I think I got last year in my stocking stuffer overconsumption frenzy. And ironically, I have none of them left because the 2 other shades were just awful on me in person. And this red shade was a complete dupe for MAC's Ruby Woo, at least for me, in my opinion. I know people with more kind of refined makeup tastes are going to see this and think, no way, like those are totally different on me, or yeah, I think they look different on you, or you can't appreciate the subtleties of what, you know, whatever. But for me and my use of makeup, it was really, really silly for me to buy the mini trio of these Pat McGraths last year. I don't actually remember why I did it. You know, what influenced me to buy those when clearly they're already leaving my life, and it is maybe 10 months later. But I think the first 2 shades left earlier this year. The pink was terrible on me, and so it made it into that bag of kind of play makeup for my kids to mess around with when I'm getting ready. And the kind of orangey red, I realized, again, maybe I wore it once or twice and just felt horrible in it because the shade was just not what I prefer on myself. And so it was just a really silly purchase. And I think doing these kinds of in-depth reviews of using what I have is teaching me that I already have what I need. I already have more than what I need. And to add anything else has a high likelihood of being something that I regret. As I spoke about in that video of I regret all the makeup that I purchased within these past 2 years. And yes, that was a little bit of a hyperbole title in that I don't actually regret everything. The eyeshadow I have kept and I have used and I do appreciate having because I do feel like it covers all of my bases. And I do feel like I have some really lovely things in there in terms of the formulas that I like, the color options, even the packaging to some extent. You know, it does feel nice, and it's nice to own things that you are happy to use. But I really do need to put the kibosh on buying any makeup. And I do actually think that it might be time for a real makeup no-buy in 2026. I can certainly start now as well in terms of not buying any more makeup in this period towards the end of the year. But I guess foreshadowing here, I think all of the work that I've done in the past 2 years and all of the kind of crises I've had and all of the kind of navel gazing that's happened on this channel, which I've had comments accusing me of before and, you know, guilty as charged. I do think that after all of that, there is a part of me that does still want to do a real no-buy, despite the evidence that it's maybe not possible for me. And we'll get more into that, I guess, closer to the time. And there are reasons that I don't want to just start it right now. And, reasons that having the year go from January to December of a full calendar year are, that's kind of satisfying for my mind. And I guess in reality, the reason that I would be doing this challenge, again, is for the satisfaction of it and to prove to myself that I can stick to whatever rules that I set out for myself. And so I guess in these last few months of the year, I will be gearing up to do that next year. I will be doing the preparation to set myself up for real success. And I guess another spoiler alert here, my no buy is probably going to be a low buy, but the rules will be very explicit on this. I do think that's actually what I did in the beginning of this year as well. I had kind of low buy, no buy rules, and then a lot of these things went out the window. But I do hope that given another year of trial and error, I've learned enough to be more successful than last time. And I don't know, maybe I just need to examine why I'm so attached to this idea of doing the kind of stoic all or nothing no buy. Maybe that's just another facet of this project as well that I can learn something from delving deeper into. So anyway, I would love to hear about your makeup collections or anything else that you've noticed that you have duplicates of, or things that you don't really need, maybe things that are identical in function, even if they weren't identical in form, maybe the same thing from different brands or similar colors of things that actually don't fulfill a different function. I would also love to hear when things do fulfill a different function. What are the same things that actually aren't the same for you? Or when does having more than one of something actually serve you in a way that's worth keeping multiples of these items? I can actually already think of some examples for me where having multiple items in the same wardrobe category, sometimes identical, the same brand, just in a different color, actually does serve me well because it enables me to have an easy kind of outfit wardrobe formula. And so for me, these examples are one particular button-up shirt, one particular pair of jeans, and then kind of different colorways of sneakers. Those are the things I have dupes of that make it really easy to get dressed. And still might be an example of having more than I need, right? These things can be true at the same time. And having done or embarked on some wardrobe experiments, I am noticing that it does take me a while to get through the clothes in my closet. I think finally, I am also going to try to do a project pan intentionally of some of my makeup products. So these are going to be the lip balm products, the tinted lip balm squeeze tubes. There are several that I need to just use up. So some of the Summer Fridays products, the mint, the vanilla, the clear formulas, the pink one, and the other two, I did find the other one, the darker browns. I have two. I need to pan all of those and repurchase just my favorite one after using all of those. And then the Rhode ones as well, the shinier ones, I might have to end up letting go of some of these pre-panning just because I've had them for multiple years. I think I'm on my third year of the same tubes, and I just don't know whether I'm going to be able to use them up in a reasonable time frame. And then I'm pretty sure some of them have gotten grainy, which is a common problem with these Rhode lip balms or whatever. And those I might just have to bite the bullet and let go of. I also want to project pan the NARS lipstick. That was kind of the My Lips But Better tinted lipstick. And as just kind of an experiment, also because I do like wearing it. And it's one of those things where when I wear it, I do feel like it's made a positive difference in not just my appearance, but my experience of presenting myself to the world. And it's one of those funny things where I definitely don't need it. Nobody needs to wear makeup. That is my stance. And I don't think people should be made to feel like they would look better with makeup or that they have to wear it to look professional or any of these things. But in the same vein, or a different vein that's running parallel perhaps, I do still feel an element of being more put together or positive intention into my appearance having put it on, even with no other makeup. And so it is a curious thing where I want to wear it more, but at the same time, I don't want to have it or wear it at all. I'm of two minds, right? Do I want to continue to be one of those people that wears a My Lips But Better lipstick every day? Or do I want to pan it and then just not have one ever again? Or maybe not ever again, but for the next time period, right? I think I've learned by now, maybe, that you can't really say you're never gonna use or buy something, because there might come a time where your needs or preferences change and you then want to bring it back into your life. So being careful with that. But it is one of those things where I'm not really decided yet. I don't really know what I think about it, to be honest. And I guess there's an element of self-care that comes with wearing just the basic touches of makeup for me that feels positive and intentional and, again, like self-care, right? Like I'm doing it for me. It's not because I feel like I have to look a certain way for other people. But there's also an element of wanting to be free from even that level of intention and self-care, or wanting to express it in different ways. And I guess in some ways it does kind of crossover, right? Like the makeup and the hygiene category, right? Like for me, honestly, things like brushing my hair even, which could be a basic hygiene activity, is sometimes something that I don't manage to do before leaving the house. And, some of these days I'll put my hair in a ponytail. It's not like I'm going out and trying to look sloppy, but there are kind of basic self-care activities that may or may not always get done. And so it's, for me, not something that's straightforward as having a set routine that I do every day. And I'm still kind of figuring that one out as far as what I actually value enough, what makes me feel good enough, what has a big enough impact for me in my life, I guess, to be worth doing or worth investing the time and the money and buying a product in. And I guess I do feel like here's where the influenced part of this comes in. I do feel like I have spent so much time in the past few years consuming content, being influenced by other people, not just the advertising, but just people online, influencers online that aren't overtly advertising, people whose lives we get a glimpse of. And again, I'm one of these people for anybody watching this video, but I have been influenced a lot by content out there in terms of what I think is normal. And I want to unlearn all of that, as much of that as possible. And, I guess, in other words, I want to unlearn as much of that as is socially acceptable to do and get my influence from the real life inputs around me. And it's a funny thing that I realize more and more that some people in my real life surroundings are also influenced by things online, and other people are very much not. And I guess I would rather be one of those people that's less influenced by things online. And it's not that anybody I know is influenced by things online to the extent that it looks ridiculous, right? Like, I think we've seen some of these things even in other commentary videos, the microtrend final boss or whatever. If we see people like that out and about in the wild in real life, we might get a sense that something strange is going on in terms of, why are they dressing like that? Why are they doing their eyebrows to stand up on end? Where is this coming from kind of thing? But I think those people in my life are few and far between, right? In the place that I live, there's not a whole lot of people who I see walking around like this. And if there are people like that, they're probably mostly in their late teens, early 20s, and more online, I guess, and also more surrounded by people that are perhaps online in the same way, following the same people in these communities of either high school or university. And I don't interact with those people on a daily basis anymore like I once did. And so I guess I'm making peace with removing myself from that cycle of awareness of what's trendy, of what's cool. And maybe this is just a part of aging in terms of not caring about that anymore, not staking any of my value on knowing that or embodying any of that, in being cool even. It's not something that I care about in remotely the same way that I once did. And for reference, I'm 32 years old, and so maybe this is just a part of being in your 30s and not in your 20s. So anyway, that was reckoning with my 6 red lipsticks and going on a huge detour about aging being cool. What reckoning with these 6 pigmented shades of lipstick taught me, I guess. And with that, I guess I will say goodbye for now and see you in the next one.